Well, with Zechariah chapter 11, we got a lot to talk about. It's not a very long chapter, but there's a lot packed into this one. So let's get started to learn here. Now, this chapter is an important one, a very important one, because it's going to set a preface for the next couple of chapters in the book of Zechariah, basically. So as we look at this, I have a quote here. This is Joseph Fielding Smith, his book, Doctrines of Salvation. He says, this chapter is a preface for the next two chapters, which are about the Battle of Armageddon. So we're going to get some context in chapter 11, and then the next two chapters are about the Battle of Armageddon. So this is last day stuff. One thing we are given by these prophets definitely to understand is that the great last conflict before Christ shall come will end at the siege of Jerusalem. So said Ezekiel and Daniel, and the Lord declared to Joel, For behold, in those days and in that time when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, i.e. the return from captivity, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. So now if you remember that from the book of Joel, go back and watch our videos on that part of Joel, and you can see more commentary on that one. So he continues on and he says, At this time prophesied Joel, will the Lord judge the heathen? This is the quote from Joel, Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full, the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is in the valley of decision. So we are given to understand that when the armies gather in Palestine will be the time when the Lord shall come in judgment, and to make the eventful decision, which will confound the enemies of his people and establish them in their ancient land forever. Zechariah is another prophet who has plainly spoken of these great events. According to his predictions, the nations will gather and lay siege to Jerusalem. Part of the city will fall with dire consequences to its inhabitants when a great earthquake will come. The Mount of Olives will cleave in twain, and the persecuted people will flee into this valley for safety. At that particular time will the Savior come as there, and show them his hands and his feet. They will look upon him and ask him where he received his wounds, and he will tell them they were received in the house of his friends. He is Jesus Christ, their Redeemer. Then will they fall to the ground and mourn every family apart, because their ancestors persecuted their king, and the children have followed in the footsteps of the fathers. At that time shall come the redemption of the Jews. Jerusalem shall then be rebuilt, and the promises that it shall become a holy city will be fulfilled. The punishment which shall come upon those who siege to this land will be their destruction. The prophets have portrayed this in much detail with all its horrors. That's the Battle of Armageddon. So we're going to get more into that in the next couple of chapters. All right, so let's jump in. Verse 1, Open thy doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour thy cedars. That's pretty strong. Telling them, open up the gates, let the fire destroy you and consume you. Verse 2, Howl, fir tree, for the cedar is fallen. Because the mighty are spoiled, howl, O ye oaks of Bashan, for the forest of the vintage is come down. So they're using an analogy of different types of trees. So fir trees, cedars, and oaks are mentioned in here. Now, fir trees are more of your soft woods, like pine type trees, basically, like a Douglas fir and things of that pine family. Cedar is a similar type of tree, a little more of a softer wood, but oak is a hard wood as well. Now, in this, Keil and Delitzsch had something to say in their Bible commentary I thought was really good. They said, the cedars and cypresses of Lebanon and the oaks of Bashan are simply figures denoting what is lofty, glorious, and powerful in the world of nature and humanity, and are only to be referred to persons so far as their lofty position in the state is concerned. Consequently, we get the following as the thought of these verses. The land of Israel with all its powerful and glorious creatures is to become desolate. Now, inasmuch as the desolation of a land also involves the desolation of the people living in the land and of its institutions, the destruction of the cedars, cypresses, etc., does include the destruction of everything lofty and exalted in the nation and kingdom. So that in this sense, the devastation of Lebanon is a figurative representation of the destruction of the Israelitish kingdom, or of the dissolution of the political existence of the ancient covenant nation. This judgment was executed upon the land and people of Israel by the imperial power of Rome. This historical reference is evident from the description which follows of the facts by which this catastrophe is brought to pass. So we're going to see this progression happening. So we're going to talk about Rome basically as a literal fulfillment, but also getting us prepared to think about the ideas of second coming, basically also. So verse 3, there is a voice of the howling of the shepherds, for their glory is spoiled, a voice of the roaring of young lions, for the pride of Jordan is spoiled. Thus saith the Lord my God, feed the flock of the slaughter. Now, Keil and Delitzsch said the flock of slaughtering is an expression that may be applied to either a flock that is being slaughtered or to one that is destined to be slaughtered in the future. So they went on to talk about the importance of this phrase, but although a flock is eventually destined for slaughtering, it is not fed for this purpose only, but generally to yield profit to its owner. Moreover, the figure of feeding is never used in the scriptures in the sense of making ready for destruction, but always denotes fostering and affectionate care for the preservation of anything. And in the case before us, the shepherd feeds the flock entrusted to him by slaying the 3 bad shepherds. It is not till the flock has become weary of his tending that he breaks the shepherd's staves and lays down his pastoral office to give them up to destruction. Israel was given up by Jehovah into the hands of the nations of the world, or the imperial powers, to punish it for its sin. We see that in a lot of Jeremiah's writings. But as these nations abused the power entrusted to them, they sought utterly to destroy the nation of God, which they ought only to have chastised. The Lord takes charge of his people as their shepherd, because he will no longer spare the nations of the world, i.e., he will not any longer let them deal with his people at pleasure without being punished. The termination of the sparing will show itself in the fact that God causes the nations to destroy themselves by civil wars and are to be smitten by tyrannical kings. These smite them in pieces, i.e., devastate the earth by civil war and tyranny, without any interposition on the part of God to rescue the inhabitants of the earth, or nations beyond the limits of Israel, out of their land, or to put any restraint upon tyranny and self-destruction. So what they're saying is, basically, and we're going to see this kind of play out through this, that Israel is still a covenant people, a chosen people. And so even though they went wicked, and they wanted, if you remember Isaiah, they wanted a divorce from God, so he gave it to them, which meant they were free to go do whatever they wanted with the world. So God let them go to the world, and the world just destroyed them, just was really bad for them. But then the world tried to literally destroy them out and have them eradicated. And God went, nope, we're not going that far. So he defended Israel to an extent to keep them around until they would realize the error of their ways and repent and come back to him. But those that fight against Israel would eventually be obliterated and destroyed. And every nation that has been obliterated eventually, basically. So verse 5, let's continue on with this. Whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty? And they that sell them say, Blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. So again, think of Israel as sheep. Think of these other worldly powers as the shepherds, like Rome, Greece, others as well, like Assyria, Babylon, okay? They're thinking, oh, look, we've enriched ourselves. We must have been blessed by God because we are prosperous. We are wealthy. Again, that's that gospel of prosperity falsehood. And so but the shepherds are seeing them, again, as property, not as people. So this is that Master Mahan principle we've talked about so often. They're not seeing them as value other than the value it enriches them with. They're not seeing them as inherently valuable to themselves. Verse 6, For I will no more pity the inhabitants of the land, saith the Lord. But lo, I will deliver the men everyone into his neighbor's hand, and into the hand of his king. and they shall smite the land, and out of their hand I will not deliver them. And I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staves, the one I called Beauty, the other I called Bands, and I fed the flock. Now, another translation of these 2 staves is favor and union. So instead of beauty and bands, favor and union. Okay, now so that's interesting to think about this idea of he's favoring and unifying, bringing his flock together and taking care of them himself. These other kings, these worldly kings, have abused the flock and used it to enrich themselves. So God is going to take care of his flock. Verse 3, 3 shepherds also I cut off in 1 month, and my soul loathed them, and their souls also abhorred me. So he's getting rid of the bad shepherds, these rulers that are treating his people bad. Verse 9, then said I will not feed you that dieth, let it die, and that is to be cut off, let it be cut off, and let the rest eat everyone the flesh of another. So if we pull back from God, we force him to do what he doesn't want to do, basically. He's saying here, basically, I'm not going to help. He's not helping the shepherds because they loathe God. They're defying God. He's helping the flock he's promised he's going to help them out. Basically, he does need to punish them. They do need to be disciplined for their own wickedness, but he's still willing to help them, and he's promised them that he would. So verse 10, and I took my staff, even Beauty, or as we think about it, favor, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I had made with all the people. And it was broken in that day, so the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of the Lord. So here's the problem they had, basically. They broke the covenant with him, so he's like, fine, you can go. And so they left, and now the poor are going, wait a minute here, things have changed. We're not being blessed of God as much. We need God back. Verse 12, and I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. So here's what's interesting about this. There's a couple things we want to think about this, okay? What is the value of God's service to the people? He's like saying, look, if you want my help, what is that worth to you? And they said, well, it's worth 30 pieces of silver, okay? So think about this, okay? 30 pieces of silver is the price of a slave, not the price of a wealthy, amazing, abundant opportunity. They're paying minimum price for the help of God in their life. So they're not willing to sacrifice much to get God's help. I mean, what would you sacrifice if you believe that God could really transform your life to be a better life? Would you give up watching certain movies? Would you give up going to certain websites? Would you give up listening to certain music? Would you change the kind of friends you have? Would you wear different clothes? Would you sacrifice your Sundays to go to church? What are you willing to give to have God in your life? These people were going to go for 30 pieces of silver, which is the price of a slave. Not much they're willing to give. So it's important for us to look at this as well. Are we doing the minimum? Or are we willing to pay a bigger price to have God's blessings in our life more? This is interesting too, because if you think about the idea of 30 pieces of silver, what was it that Judas was given for turning in Jesus? 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. They paid smallest amount they could to basically get Jesus. So that kind of a similar idea here. Verse 13, and the Lord said unto me, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them, and I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. So that's the same kind of concept again of, we can see this in the fulfillment of what Judas did. In fact, some people would say that the story of Judas was written to basically satisfy Zechariah 11, to see that analogy together. We don't know if that's true or not, I mean, it could be. It's not like it hasn't happened that way before. But it is interesting to realize when we think about this idea that there's not a lot of sacrifice. They're not willing to go to great lengths to have God in their life, basically, which is a problem. Definitely a problem that we have, and we need to think about that in our own life. Again, are we willing to pay the price to have God in our life or not? So let's see, verse 14, then I cut asunder mine other staff, even bands, which was the unity, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. So again, broken covenants, they're no longer unified. They're scattered. So the stave of unity is broken into pieces and scattered. Verse 15, and the Lord said unto me, take unto thee yet the instruments of a foolish shepherd. So what are the instruments of a foolish shepherd? Well, Guthrie and Moitier said in their New Bible Commentary, the chapter foreshadows the terrible afflictions of the Jews subsequent to their rejection of the Messiah and the ultimate downfall of their overlords. That this ruler is spoken of as my shepherd offers significant light on the sovereignty of the divine ruler over history. He is where he is by divine appointment, and the scandalous acts which his wicked heart teaches him to perform are the Lord's dread judgment on a people which rejected the true shepherd. So a foolish shepherd is going to look after themselves. They're there because they're being paid to be there, and they're only there so long as it's in their best interests. They will manipulate the flock to get their best interests. That's these instruments of a foolish shepherd, basically. Verse 16, for lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, neither shall seek the young one, nor heal that is broken, nor feed that standeth still, but he shall eat the flesh of the fat and tear their claws in pieces. So this is a shepherd that is not going to be a benevolent shepherd. This is not the Savior. This is a leader of these people who are going to basically abuse the people for their own benefit. And we can see that in some of these rulers that we've had in ancient Israel over time, basically. Similar to the idea of like the kings we learned about at the beginning, like Rome, Antiochus, and others that we've seen. Verse 17, woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. This is an important verse for a couple of reasons. Okay, now if we look at this, the idle shepherd, notice how idle is spelled. It's not spelled as I-D-L-E, idle, meaning a lazy shepherd, a shepherd who's not doing anything. An idle shepherd, this is a shepherd who's following idolatry. They're following the wrong philosophy. So important for us in their standpoint to realize that there's this shepherd that's going to come forward and he is not going to be good for the sheep. It's going to be a bad time. He's going to set up some problems for the sheep, basically. Following the wrong philosophy. Now, as leaders in an ecclesiastical standpoint, are we an idle shepherd? Are we following the truth, or are we allowing culture and tradition to dictate things to us that aren't completely true? Can we say we're following the real gospel of Jesus Christ, or are we following just the way it's always been done, or the way we think it should be done? That's something we have to be careful with. Are we an idle shepherd in the Lord's flocks? Are we pushing our agenda? Are we pushing culture in there that maybe doesn't need to be there? Are we pushing traditions that should have been let go a long time ago? Are we truly following the gospel of Jesus Christ in a more objective way and not subjective? That's a good lesson for us as anybody who's a leader in a church. It has an ecclesiastical leadership position, basically. So some good wisdom for us. But again, this is setting us up. There's going to be some prophets, but there's going to be some rulers of the people that are not going to be good rulers. They're going to set the people up for some failures. And that's leading up into some major destruction that is coming. That's the next couple chapters as we're going to see. So we'll see you over there.